Hi guys, on this installment of PJ Cooks Sexy Food, we're going to do Chinese roast pork, otherwise known as Char Siu. So let's get started.
So the ingredients list that we have today is we're starting off with 1/3 of a cup of sugar, 3 teaspoons of salt, 3/4 of a teaspoon of Oriental 5-spice powder, half a teaspoon of white pepper, 3/4 of a teaspoon of sesame oil, 1 1/4 of a teaspoon of the Shaoxing wine, 1 1/4 tablespoon of soy sauce, 1 1/2 tablespoon of hoisin sauce, 2 1/2 teaspoons of molasses, 1/4 of a teaspoon of red food coloring, 4 cloves of garlic, minced fine, half a teaspoon of ginger, minced fine, 3 tablespoons of honey, and 1 1/4 teaspoon hot water. As for our pork, we're going to use 4 pounds of Boston butt or pork shoulder that is boneless, and we're going to cut that into nice strips like you see here. It's got a fair amount of meat, but it has a good amount of fat across the top. That's what we want, because that's going to just melt away as we cook our pork. It's going to cook for a long time on a high heat, so you want that fat in there, because that's going to melt, keep it flavorful. So to make our marinade, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to combine all of the ingredients that we had, with the exception of the honey and the water. So far I put in the sugar, the salt, the 5-spice, white pepper, the sesame oil, the Shaoxing wine, got the soy sauce going in, the hoisin sauce, got the red food dye, the ginger, the garlic. Everything's going in with the exception, as I said, of the honey and the water. We're going to reserve that for just before we roast. Now be careful, because this food dye is dangerous. It'll stain anything that it comes in contact with. Okay, so we have everything in the bowl. We're just going to go ahead and mix that up to combine. So now that our marinade is combined, what we want to do is we want to take 2 tablespoons of this marinade, and we're going to reserve this for when we roast the pork. In with that marinade that we reserved, we are going to add the honey, and the water. And we are going to stir this to combine. This is finished. We're going to pop a lid on this and put this in the refrigerator. Okay, so we have our vessel that we're going to put our pork into. This is what we're going to marinate our pork in. And what I suggest is, if you can, put on a pair of gloves, because this marinade will stain your hands. And what we're going to do is we're going to spoon this all on top of the meat. And then we want to make sure we cover each and every piece, so we're going to rub this marinade into the meat. As you can see, I'm rubbing this in and making sure every piece is well coated with this marinade. This is going to be better than any Chinese takeout pork that you're going to get by making this at home. Okay, every piece is very well coated. Now I'm going to wrap this up in plastic wrap, and we're going to refrigerate this for anywhere from a minimum of 8, I prefer 24 hours for the maximum flavor. Put in the marinade for about 24 hours, and you can see the color that this has picked up from that marinade. That's exactly what we wanted it to look like. That's perfect. Now it's going to be time that we start cooking this. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put my oven up to its highest temperature. Anywhere from 475 to 550 is ideal. While the oven is heating up, I pulled out my biggest sheet pan. I lined it with foil very well. I'm going to put in a baking rack. I'm going to give that a little spritz with nonstick cooking spray. Okay, now I want to take our meat out of the marinade. I want to try to drain off as much as possible, but I still want to leave some on there. And I want to put it fat side up to begin with on our rack. What we want to do is we want to space these out. We want to make sure that there's plenty of airflow around on the pan, so that this way the meat can cook and it'll brown up beautifully. We're going to let this sit while our oven is getting good and hot. Our oven has gotten good and hot. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take about 1.5 cups to 2 cups of water. I'm just going to pour this into the bottom of our pan, not touching the meat. I'm just pouring it right into the bottom of the pan. The reason for this is as the meat cooks, the fat's going to drip off. The water is going to prevent the fat from actually burning. So this way we don't fill our house with smoke. So we're going to put this in the oven now for the first 25 minutes. Then we're going to take it out and turn the meat over. So our pork has been in the oven for 25 minutes. I just went ahead and I took it out. Now what I want to do is I want to flip every piece of our meat. See how beautifully crispy and dark it's getting on top? That's exactly what we want. Then we're going to return this back into our oven for 15 minutes. If you notice the bottom of the pan looks dry, to prevent any smoking, you can always add a little bit more water to that. So let's return this to the oven now, and we'll be back in 15 minutes. So our pork has been in the oven for 15 minutes. Now we're taking it out, and we're going to brush that reserved marinade that we had from yesterday, that we also added the honey and a little bit of water to, just to loosen it up. And we're going to brush this all over, give this a really nice coating. We're going to pop this back in the oven for about another 10 minutes. We want the outside to look really nice and crispy and dark and flavorful. And then we will take it out and we'll let it cool for a little while. Slice and enjoy. So I just took our meat out of the oven. It's been about 12 minutes. I left it in there a few more minutes just so it gets a little bit darker. I'm going to give it a light brushing more of that marinade that we had, of the glaze. Then I'm going to take this meat and I'm going to cover it. I'm going to let this rest for about 30 minutes before we go ahead and slice. Okay, so our pork is rested. Let's take one of these beautiful pieces out. And let's go ahead and slice it. I like to slice a little on the bias. This way it gets a little bit more of that beautiful crust on the outside. And you can see how it's still moist. It's still tender on the inside. You can see that beautiful red ring of that marinade that's on there. Oh, this is so delicious. Now, if you don't want to make this with pork, you can make it with chicken thighs. Boneless, skinless chicken thighs work nice. You just have to adjust the cooking time a little bit longer, but I would suggest marinating it just as long. Oh, look at how beautiful that looks. And then once it's finished, take a little bit more of that reserved marinade we had and just drizzle it right over the top. And there you go. Now you have char siu pork at home. Takes some time for marinating, not much time to cook. It's delicious. It's wonderful. I hope you make this recipe at home. Thank you for tuning in to PJ Cook Sexy Food. See you next time.